So I saw a comment in my video for paper 1-1. Someone was asking me for a detailed explanation of the cardiac cycle. So let's talk about it right now for a bit, okay? Come on. Let's go. So guys, let's talk about this. So what's the detailed explanation? Not much. I'm just going to talk about it for like 2 to 5 minutes. You don't need the phonocardiogram or the electrocardiogram. You mainly need this. So honestly, according to the question they'll give you, this is one cardiac cycle, approximately 0.8 seconds. You need to know about 4 events. This event is basically the, you know, this is the atrioventricular valve closing. This event is the aortic valve opening. This event is the aortic valve closing again, and this event is the atrioventricular valve opening finally. Okay, you guys need to know this in details. So what's happening in this section actually, from this moment onwards, okay, to this section, the ventricle is full because it's in a closed space. Okay, in this region over here, the atria have just finished pumping blood into the ventricles. Now the ventricle is just about to contract. There's a very short time span where the ventricle is about to contract, and when that happens, pressure inside the ventricle increases, but it is just high enough to close the atrioventricular valves, the tricuspid and bicuspid valve, but not high enough to open the aortic valves. But suddenly, when the pressure crosses a threshold, what happens is the aortic valve opens and the ventricle contracts. Now the blood from the ventricle enters the aorta, which is why the aortic pressure increases suddenly. But over time, the blood decreases, and after a certain limit, when the blood pressure is lower in the aorta, the valves that were open will close to prevent backward flow. And now, again, you know about the pacemaker, right? The sinatral node. It will send impulses to the atria to begin contraction again, since the pressure in the ventricles will decrease significantly. And when the atria receives the signal and starts contracting, okay, by the way, right now the ventricle is empty. We don't have blood in the ventricle. Now the atria starts contracting again. But before that, there is a time span where the atria is actually, filling up essentially. Right after ventricular contraction, the atria is filling up, and then the atria contracts. Okay, the atria contracts, and then the cycle repeats again. Okay, so let's take a look at these diagrams now. So this is the region where both are closed. This is also the region where both are closed. Okay, and the ventricle is full here, but it's kind of empty here. Okay, so let's see. Look at the ventricle volume. It's full over here. Then it contracts to let everything go. But then, right after the atria starts contracting, blood enters into the atria and into the ventricle, and it becomes full again over here. And then it contracts again. So see if you understand these stages. These you don't need these. I've basically learned this in physiology in med school. You don't need these details, all right? You just need to know about the events and what's happening where, and you need to identify the lines, okay, like which one is the aortic pressure, which one is the ventricular pressure, which one is the atrial pressure, what happens to the volume essentially. If they ask you when is the ventricle empty, honestly this region, this is where the ventricle is empty. So it's full over here and it's empty over there. So I'm gonna correlate these phases with the picture over here. So look at this purple section over here, the purple section, this one. This corresponds to atrial contraction. The atria is contracting over here, which is why there's the increased atrial pressure. Now, this blue section over here, this is where, oh, by the way, during atrial contraction, the ventricle is filling up actually. Okay, so here, the ventricle is achieving maximum volume. That's basically this section, atrial systole. Atrial contraction, the ventricle is achieving maximum volume. Then we get isovolumetric contraction. In this stage, essentially, the ventricle is a closed chamber. It is full. The pressure builds up, so both the valves are closed, both this and this. And when the pressure exceeds a certain volume, the aortic valve opens. Okay, the aortic valve opens, and then stage 3 begins. Stage 3 is basically ventricular ejection. After ejection, when the pressure falls slowly, then to prevent backflow, the aortic valve closes again. This is called isovolumetric relaxation. That's stage 4. And here the ventricle is basically empty, right? It doesn't have anything. And stage 5 is atrial filling again, because now, guys, the aortic valve is closed, but the atrioventricular valve opens again, and blood from the atria and blood from the superior vena cava and the pulmonary veins enter into the atria. That's stage 5. So the the pressure in the atrium slightly increase, and then a ventricular filling occurs, which is basically the last stage, stage 6. This is a natural process, honestly. Like when the blood enters from the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and from the pulmonary veins to the atria, naturally, due to the blood entering naturally, some of it will enter the ventricles, but just a bit. Okay, just a bit, and then that process will be extended. More blood will enter the ventricles in stage 6, and then the atria will contract. Okay, so most of the atrial and ventricular filling occur quite naturally. Do you guys understand? And that is the diastole. So basically the atrial systole occurs at the end. Okay, right here. Stage 1 is basically atrial systole, and the ventricular systole is basically stage 3 mainly, but it also takes that stage 2 part. So we get the lub sound. Okay, why do we get the lub sound? This is a very good diagram. This is amazing, honestly. You can study this diagram. We get the lub sound due to the closure of the atrioventricular valve, and we get the dub sound. Why? Due to the opening of the atrioventricular valve. Okay, there are more heart sounds, but you don't need to know those. So that's all, guys. So this is the time span for the atrial systole, and this is the time span for the ventricular systole over here. Okay, it happens right after the atrial systole until the basically, wait, let me show you. So the atrial systole corresponds to this region. It corresponds to atrial contraction, and the ventricular systole, it will occur just afterwards and until the aortic valve closes. So we can say it like this, like ventricular systole will occur right after the atrioventricular valve closes and until the aortic valve closes again after opening. See, it opened and then closed again. That's the region of the ventricular systole. And aortic systole just occurs till the atrioventricular valve closes, and it's a region just before, you're going to see that the pressure of the atria rises just before. Okay, so according to this diagram, we can fill that information up, honestly. Like this is the region of ventricular systole, and this is the region for atrial systole, this small region. Okay, get it? This is the lub, this is the dub over here. Dub. Okay, Sorry, 3. I hope that's clear. The one who wanted explanation. Sorry.